pride myself with leading with good news, so I'll continue that, but I had some frustrating news today, Mr. Chairman, which will lend itself to something I was not yet going to discuss tonight, which was the timing of a special town meeting for the fall, but we'll discuss that before we conclude my presentation of this report. The board was aware, I'm not sure, it was at the last meeting, Mr. Chairman, you may have missed it, 63 Anthony Avenue was accepted into the receivership program, which is an exceptional program through the Attorney General's office where they assign someone that essentially has ownership power to a nuisance property, and they have a right to essentially affix a certain level of rate of return on their investment. They end up with a super lien, just like a form of ownership. Many times the receiver is a very talented general contractor that will keep the property for their own real estate portfolio. They would sell it, and again, they have a super lien, so they're made whole again. So we've started that process in Swansea. Please to announce it's 63 Anthony Ave was accepted in 66 Muncie Ave unless something changes. That's in the final stage, so that also will be accepted into the receivership program unless something changes. The timing on this was interesting, whereas we had in a butter in last week that was upset, feeling like we hadn't yet done much, and it was kind of nice to say I've been in that home twice personally, and we've worked towards that, and we're right on the cusp. I called that gentleman back at the end of the week and said, listen, that unless something changes, that will be part of the state program, which has an exceptional track record. They, when the banks that have been relatively stubborn for not putting money into the nuisance properties, when they get that letter, the Attorney General's office, it seems to, they return our calls a lot quicker, it seems to shake people up. So the Swansea Dam process, we've actually made every payment. We're processing the last payment, but we've made every payment but for retainage. So very close to what is considered a closeout of that project. There's not much on this project that's really high complexity closeout. We've got the gate that needs to be continued to watch, and essentially a transfer of warranty type material on that. Other than that, the landscaping seems to be holding its own, even though we've had pretty rough watering season. Mother Nature's watering season has been pretty rough so far. So we expect that project to close out very soon. The library building committee, the library themselves through the building committee actually hosted the 4th site visit with the Massport Library Commissioner representative. So that project continues to move forward quite well. The town received 6 architect proposals for the design services for the town hall project. So we are now on the cusp of having both of those committees with both an owner's project manager and a designer. Cummings Road, we've had a good flurry of activity since Attorney Frank sent his final documents out, return receipt requested. We received 12 out of the 15 residents' paperwork. Of the remaining 3, we've had some form of communication with 2 of the 3. There still is one family that's somewhat of a holdout. We've talked about ways to reach out to them. I don't know that I want to bang on someone's door necessarily right now, but certainly we've got some additional correspondence out and work towards getting a sense of what's happening with the remaining 3 residents on Cummings Road. And lastly, initially we had some continued good news. The Waterfront Revitalization Committee, we had a site visit on Thursday. We had pretty solid turnout for what would be their owner's project manager, so that would be yet a 3rd project with a designer and an owner's project manager. It's pretty robust. I was notified today through the treasurer, the bond council, looking at our effort to go to permanent bonding for the Waterfront Rebuy, recognized that the time from the town meeting vote, November 2nd, 2015, to the vote on the ballot, which I believe was April 8th this year, our election, early April, that time frame, and I'm personally very frustrated with myself because this is something that I have a very good background in, and I take full responsibility for not recognizing this deadline. The fall town meeting vote needed to happen within a window of 90 days of the ballot vote. Each vote individually was an accurate vote. Neither vote was flawed. debt authorization votes typically are on the books forever until you actually vote to take them off. This was a contingent debt authorization. The ballot vote is a standing vote, will continue in perpetuity, that a waterfront project of that nature is allowed to be exempt from Proposition 2.5. So those two separate votes are intertwined, but they're two very separate and distinct authorizations. One gives us 100% relief from Proposition 2.5's levy limit calculation for the debt service temporarily while the project is financed through the bond. The first vote is the actual appropriation process. So we actually had targeted it happening in the same fiscal year within 5 months. I felt that we were following the rules, and I thought we were going to be okay, more than okay. The interesting part to the comment Mr. High made, the committee in their due diligence was really adamant that, and it made sense. I take responsibility for not meeting the timeline. But the effort was to not have it at a special town meeting, have it at the regularly scheduled fall town meeting, and then have it by design at the annual election, so that both of those events had the maximum participation, avoiding any discussion that we tried to twist the numbers, that we had an off-cycle special town meeting, or that we had an off-cycle special election. So the debt exclusion vote, which was the townwide ballot vote, that is still standing. What needs to happen for the project to continue forward is a new appropriation. So it would be the exact language that we had at the November 2nd special town meeting, eliminating the language that refers to this is contingent if you get the debt exclusion vote. What really throws me with this whole process is that the law allows for the debt exclusion on an existing project. So had the police station never been debt excluded, you could vote that today and then take that outside of the Proposition 2.5 calculation. But you only have a 90-day window when you do the vote together. So puzzling requirement. I certainly own the failure to stick to that deadline. There is no, there's no other fallout from this other than getting the appropriation back on schedule. So there's neither one of those votes is damaged if we have another special town meeting, which we would schedule this fall and appropriate that debt service again. So the language would be no different than language you would use for borrowing for a fire truck.
Well, let me offer this, Mr. McAuliffe. There was temporary borrowing of $1.1 million.
Right.
That's a set aside. That's in full force in effect. That was borrowed. Money is available.
I don't recall if we borrowed all of the temporary debt service of the 1.1, but I would think we probably have.
Well, I've been watching the pay amounts, and there have been substantial payments to the architect and everybody else for that project.
Correct.
I hope that we don't have an issue with over expenditure of that account.
We still have hundreds of thousands of dollars within that original 1.1, but we're nowhere near hitting that amount. So the language in both reference design, permitting. I don't know that the second vote references the dredging, but the first vote was geared towards the dredging, design, and permitting. So we're still in that first phase.
Well, I would offer this, because what you're saying, and let's be clear about this, you're saying that the project's not moving forward without another affirmative vote at a special town meeting or any
Correct.
town meeting. I can't sit here today and say whether or not that would occur, but that's a very funny situation with respect to the account that is currently funded. We better take certain actions to make sure that that's not overexpended.
I can assure you it's not. It's recessed
Well,
today.
what's the committee got committed? We need to take a look at this so that doesn't happen.
Right. So that 1.1 is not in danger of being overexpended.
Well,
We
there
haven't.
were plans for demolition of the existing bluffs building, that was $300,000. or something like that. I don't have the schedule of values in front of me. My recollection was 275 or 300 grand. And then the dredging was a substantial amount of money. I thought it was planned for this winter. We need to communicate with that committee. Are they aware of this?
I've spoken with the leadership of the committee today.
We need to have a full accounting of what's been spent, what remains, and communicate that with the committee and watch that very carefully so there's not an over expenditure. Because just think what would happen if there wasn't an affirmative vote. And there was an over expenditure. That's a mess. We've had a mess on the agenda tonight already. Let's not have another. Can we get an accounting of the employee membership, get an accounting of what that looks like, see how close we are, and then communicate that to the committee and have them restrain their expenditures if need be. I think that's a reasonable approach.
The project's it's behind schedule anyway because of permitting and regulatory issues. I think it's prudent to have those concerns and those expenditures. I think that we can take that into account and make sure it doesn't happen. But I'm comfortable with the representation used from all of them today because the project's behind schedule anyway.
Well, there's been some environmental approvals. We're actually in a holding pattern until August 26th at the moment comes through with some environmental approvals. So, my frustration, my internal frustration will certainly grow on August 26th. We certainly hope it gets a green light. August 27th or August 26th rather than know if this is going to be any portion of a time delay. The OPM service is coming on board. Part of that I think would be very important to look at the existing drawings as kind of a peer review. So I would like to move forward with that piece of this because I wouldn't want those drawings to get further without another outside set of eyes. That's a pretty standard part of this process. And by the time that is completed, we should know if we have the support of town meeting to get the project properly funded. Town meeting appropriation process.
It's time to get
I guess my only questions would be, at this point, I would concur with Mr. Marquis. It's prudent that we at least do our due diligence to make sure we're not overspending, specifically on that one. But then I think rather important is some education to the committee members who work so hard on this project, what's going on, how this happened, and what the course of actions are going to be moving forward.
I think an expeditious special town meeting is probably something they would like to see. I have had conversations with the chairman a couple of weeks ago saying if the architect's 100% construction documents, if those aren't done fairly soon, then it would be my preference to break ground in the spring. If the construction documents aren't 100% complete, those won't be complete. They can't be completed sooner than August 26th, and there's a chance that with or without that environmental issue, I'm not sure if the architect's 100% construction documents will be done. So the time delay will be twofold if there is one. One is if the environmental approval happens, that's great news. That means we now will have a time delay in terms of the appropriation having to be revoted. And that's also predicated upon if the architect has a full set of construction documents that can go out. Independent of that, I would still prefer to see an OPM, which that process as a filing concludes this Friday, but the committee will not have time to select an OPM for several weeks regardless. So we're okay until about that 1st of September, and then either the environmental piece will be a go, the architectural bidding process, the oversight for an OPM will be in place, the bidding process will take place in September. That's without a town meeting, that's when that time delay will start to happen. If the drawings and bid documents are 100% complete, our new OPM has done peer review of all the drawings before they hit the street. All of those things happening, that's when you see a time delay without the
fair to, just for my clarity, that would require another 2/3 vote at a
Correct.
special town meeting.
Borrowing authorization is, it's literally no different, it's chapter 44, section 7 and 8, it's no different than any other borrowing at this point. The other one was a reference to the debt exclusion piece, which, again, curiously, if we did not make this a contingent vote, then we would have rolled the dice that we would be in trouble when we try to set the tax rate. The new debt service would certainly likely put us over the levy limit. Doing it the contingent way, I think is the proper way. If we not, then we wouldn't fall into this shelf life issue that because it's contingent, the vote's only good for so long. If it was a permanent vote, we would have run the risk of being over the levy limit when the project was fully funded 2 years from now.